In this video, I'm going to show you how to use a JavaScript library called Knack API that I developed, which helps interact with the Knack API more efficiently. So why do we need it? So the Knack API is super powerful, but there's no official JavaScript library for interacting with it, so it can be really hard to use. And so Knack API Helper improves on these by providing a much easier interface for interacting with the Knack API that takes care of a lot of the low-level logic for you, so you can just focus on building your app. So to find Knack API Helper, go to npmjs.com and you search Knack API Helper, and then you'll come up to the documentation. So it can be run in both server-side code, like a Node.js server or Pipedream or some other automation that lets you run code. And it can also be run in browser, so a normal HTML page or the Knack JavaScript area, so client-side code. Knack API Helper supports API calls for get, post, put, and delete, which you see down here somewhere. And it supports both get and get many records, post and post many records, so creating one or more records, updating one or more records, and deleting one or more records. And it also has some other helper methods. So in this video, we're going to just demonstrate it in a very simple Knack app. So in my Knack app, I have a object called projects, where we just have a name and a status. And I have 25 projects loaded into there already. All of them are in progress. Then I have one other table in the database, which doesn't do anything, but just lets me create a form, which I'm going to need. So I also have user roles enabled. Over in pages, I just have a simple login page protected for any user to be able to log into. And on that page, I have a grid of projects, and I have an empty form, which we're going to use to trigger some code. So my objective is on this page to be able to click this button and have all of these projects update to complete using an API call. Let's go have a look at the front end quickly, and then we'll launch into the code. Okay, so I have to be logged in. And here's my page. So I don't want to be manually updating all of these to complete. I want to click this button and all should go to complete. All right, so let's jump into our code and make this happen with Knack API Helper. So I have my documentation here, and I'm going to look at the instructions for how to load into the Knack JavaScript area. This is just some code to help you do that. You don't have to know how it works, but you just have to copy it in and change one thing. I'm going to do that. And I just have to change my version in here. And I'm going to change it to the latest version, which is version 2.2.1, which you can see here. Okay, if I save that now, I'm not going to see much has happened, but my app should still work. No errors, but nothing happened either. So now I need to use Knack API Helper. So this code let me import Knack API Helper, and now I can make use of it. This is all in the documentation, but I'll just explain it as I go. So we want the form on submit of this empty form here, we want to trigger our update. So let's just do this to start with. So document on Knack form submit view6, which is that view. We're going to run a function with async at the front, so we can use asynchronous await keyword and make our code cleaner. So this is just basic Knack coding. Now the first thing we need to do is initialize Knack API. So we're going to do that here. There's different ways to initialize in the documentation, but basically we have to make a new instance of this Knack API, which we loaded in. And we're going to say we're going to use view-based authentication because that's the environment we're in. You should never use object-based authentication in the Knack JavaScript area, but always view-based. We're going to get our application ID from the automatically available application ID in the window just by going knack.application ID, and then the user token of the logged in user as well here. So this means we're going to be able to run API calls as this particular logged in user in this Knack app. And so this is on click of this button, we're going to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is show the Knack spinner. And then we're going to get all project records from the database. So that's this. So we get Knack API, get many, and we have to, since we're using view-based authentication, say what view are we getting data from. So scene 3, view 4. Then once we have our project records, we're going to get the actual records from that response. And for now, we're just going to console.log the projects and have a look at that. Okay, so we've initialized Knack API Helper, then we've shown the spinner, and then we've gotten project records from scene 3, view 4. So this is scene 3, this is view 4, which is a grid of projects. So if the logged in user has access to that, then we'll be able to run an API call to get data from it. So let's see if that's working. We're going to open up the browser JavaScript console, and we're going to refresh. And we should, when we click our button, see 25 project records here, which we do, which is great. So we've managed to run an API call so far to get a bunch of data from our database, which is very cool since we only have to write a few lines of code to do it. Now, the next thing we want to do is update each of those project records status to complete. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is modify our existing project records with the new information. So we're going to go use a normal JavaScript method on an array. So map projects.map. So that's iterating through each project and mapping, creating a new array. So we're going to give the record ID unchanged, and we're going to set field 2, which is our status field in the project, to complete. So we just have created a new array of projects, but we haven't actually saved them to the database yet. So let's see what that looks like when we save our code and refresh the front end. Okay, so click our button. We've got our 25 original project records, and we can see that status is in progress. And now we have our 25 updated project records, well, records ready to update in the database. And we've said, here's the record ID and here's the status, which is now complete. So we haven't saved any data to our database yet, but we have prepared the data that we're going to need to save to the database. So the final step is to save those updated records to the database. So we're going to go use our Knack API again. We're going to go put many, which means we're running many put requests, so many update record requests. So 25, because we have 25 records. We're going to use scene3 view 4 again, which is our grid view, which has inline editing enabled. So therefore, we're allowed to update data into it. And then we're going to set this thing called records to the updated project records that we prepared earlier. When that's finished, we're going to reload the page, and we should see that all our projects have been set to complete. I'm going to save one more time. I'm going to reload the front end. Okay, once it loads, we will be able to go ahead and do that. So here we are, all sitting at in progress. I'm going to click that and wait. And then when our page refreshes, we should see all our projects are set to complete. So our API call worked, which is awesome. So just with not very many lines of code, we were able to run a bunch of API calls, including running 25 API calls to update records. And Knack API Helper took care of all the complex logic behind that. So it took care of making a delay between each of these 25 requests to the database to make sure we don't hit our rate limits. It took care of any automatic error retrying. Just made it really, really easy to use the Knack API.